the porn addiction, that's another powerful one that I think will probably resonate with a lot of people. And it's interesting that you say that's one of the hardest addictions to overcome.
Let me say it this way. Some addictions have a much bigger societal look, and porn is just not one of them, which makes it super hard. None of your friends are going to cheer you on. If you go on Twitter and say, I quit porn, they're going to be like, well, that's good for you, but not everybody, no one makes that argument with meth, right? No one's going to be like, well, not everyone has to quit meth, okay? It's actually a fine industry, and people who, are the ones producing it, they're good also, right? Like, no one's going to make that kind of argument. Whereas with porn, you're going to have like a whole thing, and friends are going to think you're dumb for doing it or whatever. It's like it's a much more difficult one in just like that. So it feels accepted.
And I think it's also an addiction you can participate in privately, and hide it from the world. There's certain addictions that are harder to hide from the world for prolonged periods of time.
Yeah.
And porn addiction is probably one you can just have for many years, and then it can deepen. That's probably like a serious issue. Boy, am I glad I grew up before the internet. Because porn is so accessible, so easy to go deep into that addiction. What can you speak about what impact it had on your life? Maybe some of the low points, but also how to overcome it.
I'd say as far as impact goes is that you will have such a long and broken look at women. By the very, I'm only speaking from a male's perspective, that porn in its just like most basic thing is that you use another person for your own desire or your own want. It's not something that is deeply needed. There's no need for porn. It's purely a want-based activity or a lust, however you want, whatever word you can fill in there. And it is purely an objectifying activity. Like someone else is on display for your own enjoyment. And so I think you carry this around. Like I do think that the women that I dated during high school or the women after high school and college, like I looked at them as a means to an end. I think porn greatly kind of shifted that kind of perspective in my head that I did not give the value that was desired to another person. It really devalues humanity just in general is my perspective of it. And then it makes people into commodities. And I don't think people are commodities. I think everyone has value. And so during that, for me, that's kind of like the great effect of porn is that, it's just consumerism gone wild, or materialism, maybe you could argue, gone wild. And it's extremely hard to quit, just like you said, because I can look at porn and then I can go out to lunch.
Mm-hmm.
No one's going to know. No one's going to have any ideas. Like it's a very private, it can be very short session. It doesn't have to be something that takes you can't take acid then go out to lunch, right? Your whole day is going to be a very different day. Mm-hmm. And so it's very quick, easy, accessible. And then obviously there's like all the science and statistics, like men make worse decisions for some period of time after looking or being exposed to sexualized images. There's the whole dopamine effect. That's just like you constantly need more and more dopamine. That's why people typically don't just watch 5 minutes of porn and call it a day. There's the 100 tab joke that's always made on the internet. Mm-hmm. It's because it's just this constant dopamine cycle you're constantly doing. And all that stuff is great to say. And I'm sure statistics and science and all that stuff is really great arguments for some amount of people. But for me, it just comes down to is it really a good thing to do? Is it really actually something we want, is to value people in such a profane or kind of just disregarding way? I just really think it's just bad for the soul, even if all the stats said it was great for you. Mm-hmm. I still say it's actually bad.
Yeah, you have to look at the long-term, big picture psychological impact it has on your relationships with human beings in general. That's more generally than just porn. My problem with the quote unquote sort of manosphere is I think sleeping with a bunch of women is great. Wonderful. But the problem is making that the primary objective of your life, similar with porn, is you devalue one of the most awesome things, which is intimacy. That's true for deep friendship. That's true for relationships. And I think porn does that in its purest, darkest form, which is the thing that matters is the sex, not the deep connection with another human being. And I think, again, going back to high school and the manosphere, the objective function, if it's to get laid which helps with status and confidence and all that is wonderful. I think, again, can be an addiction, but the thing that's even more awesome for a lot of people is a deep friendship or deep intimacy with a romantic partner. Like that's also fucking awesome. And both of those are great.
It's objectively better to have. Like, I would say that there's no universe that exists, or there should be no argument possible that exists, that a guy who has meaningless sex has a better or a more meaningful life than, say, me and my wife who've been together for 15 years. We have a very, like, I can depend on her in all circumstances. Whereas if you live that other life, it sure, it could feel great, but there's no meaning to it. There's no actual real value to it.
That's absolutely correct. I do think that getting laid can have a tremendous positive impact on the confidence of a young man. I think just there's a certain number of sexual partners from which you can collect a lot of data, and it can free you about, like, not to be so nervous about the opposite sex, not to be so nervous about human interaction. And that will allow you to see the world more clearly and to actually find that one partner that with whom you could be deeply intimate with. Sometimes, like, the nervousness around, like, this societally constructed, like, value in getting laid can cloud your judgment. And if you just release that by getting laid a bunch of times, then, like, you could see the world clearly, that getting laid is not as nearly as important, as you said, as finding the right human. Including, I should put in that pile, not just like a romantic partner, but like friendships, like deep lasting friendships.
Well, I mean, I think you're right that our society puts a lot of emphasis on getting laid. And I'm sure that's true among any group of males throughout any point in history. I'm sure that's a very common joke that's never actually, like, never stopped at any point. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that exists, but and there's probably some truth to the sense that after you've, who was it? Jim Carrey, I hope that everyone can get rich so they realize that money solves none of your problems.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
the realization that this thing that society told you is hyper important is actually not the important part. Like, it is a very important, it's a great sign that your relationship is healthy. Like, if me and my wife were to have no sex at all for months on end, like, something's gone wrong, which means we are no longer, like, on the same plane, but it's not also a good identifier. Just because you're having a lot of sex doesn't mean you're having a good relationship. And so it's kind of like a unique kind of, I forget the right term here, but it's a unique way at looking at the problems, and our society puts so much emphasis. And maybe that's why porn was so hard to quit, but my guess is just all the dopamine effect that it is. But for me, like, the most important part and the thing that actually has real reward is having just my wife. I do not look at, I desperately try not to look at any other woman. I'm hopefully not going to get caught Mark Zuckerberg at the White House like that. Like, I don't look at porn. My wife has complete confidence in me that there is not going to be a situation in which she has to question me in any kind of sense. And that builds a much more deeply, I would argue, a very deep relationship, because the trust is that much bigger. I think the deepness of the relationship is probably proportional to the trust you have in each other. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to have a deep relationship with no trust.
Yeah, and probably a prerequisite, maybe a component of trust, is vulnerability, to where you, like, take the leap of being vulnerable with another human being, and that vulnerability, when reciprocated, builds this really strong trust, and it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, I personally, just given my position, that's even more challenging. Being vulnerable with the world, and there's a bunch of people out there that want to hurt you for it, and but I think it's worthwhile anyway to be vulnerable.
It's always worth it. The risk is always worth it in some sense. Like, obviously everyone has a different kind of life they have to filter through their actions with, right? Because the person that has no, say, social following or anything, their risk reward profile could just be local impact, which could be just as, damning or harming to them.
Yeah.
And so it's always worth the risk, though, in my personal opinion, because, like, finding my wife has been obviously the most impactful or changing thing in my life. So, or second most. I'd argue that one night with God would probably be the most impactful thing that led to everything else, but then the wife would be the next most impactful. I mean, I'm, like, cleaning up after myself and stuff now. Changed man. I'm a changed man.
Can we try to reverse engineer that moment of you finding God? What is it, at 19? Because it feels like that was a big leap for you to escape the pain, to escape the addiction, or the beginning of that journey. What do you think? What do you think happened there?
I think it just felt like there was no line that I wasn't willing to cross. Like everything was fine. And just like, it just all of a sudden, just in that moment, it's just like I had I guess, some sort of deep fear and understanding, like, I am going down a path. Is this really the path you want to go down? And I don't know what the result of that path would be or anything like that. I don't tend to speculate on things I don't understand. I just know that in that moment, I had the option. And I just chose, I didn't want it anymore, right? It's kind of mixed in this whole thing where it's just like I had no value. I wrapped up all my meaning or value in having sex or getting laid. I had, all that stuff, all the things we just talked about, like that was where all my worth was. And that is just such a terrible place to have your worth. And it's just like kind of all came to a point. And I can't tell you the day of the week. I can't tell you anything other than it was nighttime and I was in South Hedges in Montana State University. Go Bobcats. That's the sign that we do at football games. Don't worry about it. But like, that's all I can really tell you. Cause that night was no more or less special than some other night. It's just the specialness was, I got at least a chance to make a choice.
Could you find in that advice that you can give to others who are probably, there's probably just an endless amount of people that are struggling with porn addiction now, young people. What advice could you give to them? How to overcome it?
For me to overcome it, I had to realize that I was taking something away from my future wife. Some people be like, oh, well, you just, once you get a girlfriend, then you can stop. And it's just like, no, because you never stopped the problem. You don't stop a problem by replacing it. And so I didn't have a girlfriend, didn't have all that. I just realized that I was truly taking away from something for my future wife. And I didn't even know my current wife at that time. She was not in the picture. I'm not even sure if she was at Montana State University at that point. And so it's just, once I made that realization, I think it went from my head to my heart, which they say is the greatest distance in the universe. I finally got it. And that's really where things change. So if the ability to say what's going to help you change and all that, I don't think there's silver bullets, right? If someone could offer you a drug, I forget who says this phrase, but there's this really interesting phrase that goes something like, he was a very depressed man and he was struggling with suicide, and he kind of writes about this in this memoir. And he goes to these doctors, and the doctors effectively say, well, here's antidepressants, it's going to help you. And he says that, well, the problem is that scientists told me that I could just touch my brain and make myself happy. And that's it. Like they could reach in, they could configure some stuff and I'll be happy. He's like, for me, it was a lot like going out into a field and being able to take a drug to see the rain. I could look out, see the rain, it would fall down, it'd be silvery, it'd be beautiful, but all the crop would still die because there's not actually any rain. I had to discover how to be happy myself. And so for me, it's like the reason why I looked at porn is because I was unhappy. I was trying to find meaning. I was trying to find value in something, right? Something that was supposed to finally give me this ultimate satisfaction. And it just does not. No matter how hard and no matter how much you think it will, there is no escapade, there is no pornography that will ever give you that satisfaction you're looking for. That's the reason why it's addicting. And that's kind of like my call to why you shouldn't do it. But how to get out of it, I only got out of it by realizing.
I think that's really brilliantly described. You knew that this thing you're doing is preventing you from finding your future wife. And future wife could mean more, even broadly, this path to a flourishing, to a beautiful life. I think there's a lot of choices we make that are just preventing us from opening the door to whatever future. I think what's really nice to do is to imagine, just like we said with high school, that there are a bunch of trajectories in life where you'll be truly happy. And you need to construct your life in a way where you have the chance to travel down those paths. And there's a bunch of addictions, there's a bunch of choices that prevent us from traveling down those paths. So just believe that you're going to have an awesome life and remove from your life the things that are preventing you from walking down that that path, which is essentially what you did. It's a leap of faith that, like, if you let go of porn, that a better life is waiting for you on the other end.
Yeah. I definitely can't say how long it will take a better life, but for me, there's no way in the universe I could have had the relationship that I have without first making those steps, because I couldn't value, like, I couldn't value my wife in the way that was proper for who she was. I would have valued her through the index or the lens that I currently was looking through. So